To those of you that just joined, thank you for joining. We received more than 4,000 registrations for this seminar, and we're thrilled to have you all here. And we're going to get started with the main event with Shreyas in a minute or two. And I think with this, I'm just going to pause the music and I'll walk through a couple of quick slides just to cover the most important logistical points so you can maximize your next hour or so. Real quick, here's a quick intro to the other folks on the team. My name is Shrey, in case you missed it and just joined in the past minute. I'll be your host today. Given we have a longer Q&A session, we will have two Q&A moderators. Stina and Satyajit will be our moderators extraordinaire, and I'm excited already for the Q&A session. You can post your questions for Shreyas on the Slack channel, which is a good reminder to please join the Slack. I've just posted the Slack link just a minute ago, but I'll do so again in case folks just joined over the past 30 seconds. So please join the Slack. You can add questions for Q&A. You can discuss with over 2,000 people that are already part of the Slack. And there's also the Zoom logistics channel for any tech support. We collected some questions in Slido already. We're going to go through them first. But please, if you have any live questions, please post or upvote them on questions for Shreyas. Lastly, it's just a small request. Please don't DM Shreyas on Slack as he's super focused on presenting. Please just use the Q&A channel for your questions. And while we're waiting for folks just to settle in, Shreyas wanted me to share with you all his current passion project. As some of you may be aware, over the past year, Shreyas has been teaching a course on PM career management. More than 2,000 PMs have already taken this course. This includes senior PMs and PM leaders, but also many folks in engineering, design, and other product-related roles. Folks have taken this course from companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Stripe, Square, Airbnb, GE, Dell, Spotify, DoorDash, LinkedIn, Grammarly, Freshworks, Gojek, Shopify, Flipkart, DocuSign. I could really go on. The list is hundreds of startups and larger companies all over the world. The next cohort is in exactly 2 weeks. So if you've made a New Year resolution related to your career or want to take your career to the next level this year, look for a special announcement in about 30 minutes from now. And now that's enough for me. Without further ado, here is Shreyas.
Thank you, Shrey. Thank you, team. It's really great to see you. I see that we are almost at 600 attendees, which is amazing. And I'm sure we'll have many more folks join this seminar. And I'm really very thrilled to be sharing my thoughts with you all today about this topic of communication, messaging, and I was thinking about the right term, and it's really like tricky conversations that we as leaders, as product people, product managers, we all need to have usually on a daily basis. And, while I've shared these ideas a lot with my team members and in my coaching in the past, you all are actually the very first group with whom I'm sharing these ideas publicly. So let's get started. And an important message before we get right into the content, I do these seminars to help people with their product jobs and help their teams at work. So now I know 99% of you are focused on your job and not interested in a content hustle. So this slide is for the 1% of you perhaps or less who are doing a side hustle related to content. And I just wanted to remind you that the content I'll share in this seminar is for your product job, not for your newsletter hustle or TikTok hustle or course hustle or whatever else. So please do not repackage any content here for your creator hustle. All right, with that, here's a quick view of how we will spend our time together. Remember, as Shrey said, this is a Q&A heavy session. So I'll start with a short 20 to 25 minute presentation. So I won't be doing 80 minutes of just slides today. But instead, we'll do a long Q&A. We'll actually do 2 different Q&A sessions here. And, in my presentation, I'll share some lessons and techniques that took me more than 10 years to learn as a leader, and as a leader who was trying to get better at communication and navigating tricky conversations. So after my presentation, we'll jump into our first Q&A. Stina and Satyajit will be co-moderating our Q&A. And we'll take a short break, during which we'll share some announcements and updates. And then we'll go back to address the questions. So if any questions arise as I'm going through the presentation, please post them in Slack in the channel Questions for Shreyas. The link is already in your Zoom chat, right? And then our moderators will pick the questions that are most insightful and most generally applicable from the questions in Slack. We will not be able to get to all questions, unfortunately. We never can, but we'll try our best to get to the most insightful and the most generally applicable questions. All right. So first, I wanted to quickly share with you 3 non-obvious insights about communication that I wish I knew earlier. Okay. So one of the things I cover extensively in my course is most problems that smart and talented people encounter when working in a group are actually messaging problems. Okay. And this is important because if you want to get good at solving problems, you not only need to get better at problem solving skills, but you also need to work on making your messaging more compelling and clear, so folks are better aligned with you. You see, most of the time for smart and talented people, we kind of know roughly what the right answer is, but the struggle is actually in the messaging, right? And that's why most problems, if not all problems, are messaging problems. And this mindset is really essential to establish if you want to drastically improve your ability to communicate and your ability to influence people, right? So what I want you to take away from this, I don't want you to critically analyze this and do any kind of detailed, scientific study or cohort study of sorts. What I want you to embrace from this is the mindset, right? That problems that you face are usually, if not always, messaging problems, or at least they have a messaging component to it. Okay. All right. Next, this one took me literally 10 years to understand. It's embarrassing, but it's true. Okay. So the takeaway is your communication elevates people's perception of all your other skills. Okay. So what does that mean? So I want everybody to understand the reason communication, influence, messaging are important is because communication is not just a separate skill by itself. Okay, communication is not just a separate skill by itself. You see, when you improve your communication, you end up elevating people's perceptions of all your other skills. Okay, so let's take an example. This is very important. So say you are highly skilled in getting things done. Okay, you just get things done really well. Now that's great, right? And maybe that gets you an exceeds expectations rating at work, which is also great. Now, but if you're ambitious, you're thinking, okay, how can I go from exceeds expectations to greatly exceeds expectations, right? And so basically there are 2 ways you can get to greatly exceeds from here, right? You can show tremendous impact from the things you get done, right? So just getting things done is good, but you also can show tremendous impact, right? But impact takes time, doesn't it? Right? So the other thing you can do is to be a much better communicator on the things you have gotten done. So mind you, you're not really changing your core skill. You're just communicating better, right? And I know a number of people have asked this question, which is basically some people get things done, but still they don't get the recognition they deserve because their communication leaves a lot of people with bad taste. They can be perceived as bulldozing, not caring, not being empathetic enough, etc., etc. Right? So essentially, this is a communication problem. And if you improve your communication, you'll almost certainly end up improving people's perception of your execution ability. Even if your execution ability stays the same, communication improves people's perception of your execution ability. And this applies to strategic abilities. This applies to product sense, analytical sense, everything. Communication elevates people's perception of all your other skills. Okay? All right, third and final insight. Okay? Have you ever noticed that sometimes we'll say yes to an invitation from somebody, even though we know the correct decision would have been to say no, right? So why does this happen, right? Why does this happen? Well, it happens because when we make a decision, and this includes decisions we make at work, we typically weigh the pros and cons of the 2 or 3 options before us, right? We all do that. Now, here's the really interesting thing about decision making. If one of these options seems more correct, okay, rationally, if one of the options we're evaluating seems more correct, but if that option is hard to communicate, okay, or if we think it is going to cause an awkward or difficult conversation, meaning we will need to initiate an awkward or difficult conversation, we actually end up viewing this difficulty in communicating as a con for that option. So we ding that option, right? And so then we sometimes choose a worse option because it is going to be easier for us to communicate. Now, anyone who said yes to an assignment when they're completely overloaded, or yes to a meeting when their schedule is full, or opted not to ask your manager about promotion plans, or opted not to give feedback to a team member because it's tough feedback, or you purchase Girl Scout cookies even though you want to reduce sugar in your diet, right? You know what I'm talking about here, right? So the takeaway here is that if you want to get good, if you get good at difficult conversations, you will actually make better decisions because you'll have the confidence that you can communicate what needs to be communicated in the most graceful way possible. All right, so these are my 3 core insights that took me a very long time to understand and internalize that I just wanted to share with you up front. Okay, now with that, I want you to watch this short clip from the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. Okay, and I chose this clip for you all because it is a wonderful encapsulation of some of the axioms I'll be sharing with you later. Right now, whether or not you've seen this movie, you don't need a ton of context before you watch the clip. But the quick context is this movie is a rags to riches story of Chris Gardner. Here, Chris is struggling to make ends meet and he wants to get into finance. And so he shows up for a job interview for an internship at a San Francisco firm after having a really bad night, which we'll hear about. So let's watch it all together. It's about 3 minutes.
Chris Gardner.
Chris Gardner. How are you? Good morning. Chris Gardner. Chris Gardner. Good to see you again. Chris Gardner, pleasure. I've been sitting out there for the last half hour trying to come up with a story that would explain my being here dressed like this. And I wanted to come up with a story that would demonstrate qualities that I'm sure you all admire here, like earnestness or diligence or team playing to something. And I couldn't think of anything. So the truth is, I was arrested for failure to pay parking tickets.
Parking tickets?
And I ran all the way here from the Polk station, the police station.
What were you doing before you were arrested?
I was painting my apartment.
Is it dry now?
I hope so.
Jay says you're pretty determined.
Oh, he's been waiting outside the front of the building with some 40-pound gizmo for over a month.
He said you're smart.
I like to think so.
And you want to learn this business.
Yes, sir, I want to learn this business.
Have you already started learning on your own?
Absolutely.
Jay,
Yes, sir.
how many times have you seen Chris?
No, I don't know. One too many, apparently.
Has he ever dressed like this?
No. No. Jacket and tie.
First in your class? In school? High school?
Yes, sir.
How many in the class?
12. It was a small town.
I'll say.
But I was also first in my radar class in the Navy, and that was a class of 20. Can I say something? I'm the type of person, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I'm gonna tell you that I don't know. But I bet you what? I know how to find the answer, and I will find the answer. Is that fair enough?
Chris, what would you say if a guy walked in for an interview without a shirt on? And I hired him. What would you say?
He must have had on some really nice pants.
All right, great clip, one of my favorites. So now I want to share with you 9 axioms of interpersonal communication, and you'll see shortly how some of your observations from this clip relate to some of these axioms of interpersonal communication. But first, what are axioms? You see, in any complex system, axioms are used as starting points for reasoning. Right? For instance, these are the 5 axioms of algebra, and these should all seem familiar. Notice how these axioms are very simple, almost too simple, right? But they are the simple building blocks from which you can derive arbitrarily complex equations and generally arbitrarily complexity in algebra, right? So meaning you can really solve complex problems by working up from these kind of simple axioms, right? And turns out that this is not just true in algebra or in geometry, right? Turns out that if you want to master interpersonal communication, it is useful to understand the 9 axioms of interpersonal communication, all right? So I'm going to share these axioms in one single slide, one by one. Now, I want you to remember each axiom might seem simple, just like the axioms of algebra or the ones for geometry, right? But as you combine them together for a difficult communication situation you're facing, and with a good diagnosis of the real issue and some practice, you will become drastically better as a communicator, okay? So the first axiom is, people don't listen very well, all right? The second one is, but people love it when you listen to them. So you'll notice how the big boss in that clip really wanted Will Smith's character and his other colleagues to listen to what he had to say, right? So that's just one example. Third, people love feeling like they are right. Notice I did not say people love being right, okay? It's the feeling of being right that they're craving, not the being of being right, all right? Fourth, people love getting entertained. People love getting entertained. And there are 2 key tools you have to entertain people in your communication. Okay? 2 key tools. Now I want you to think about what those might be for a second. And I'll tell you, the first and usually the best tool to entertain people in your communication is humor. And the second is stories. Okay? First is humor, and the second best is stories. All right? And again, in that clip, you saw how humor was used on both sides of the table, right? And I'll just briefly mention humor a little more because it's so underrated. All right? It turns out that, like, it's interesting to think about why humor is so powerful in communicating in a really compelling way, in getting the other person to listen to you more, right? So I want you to think about this question for a second. Why is humor so powerful? Okay, why is humor so powerful? Everybody knows about stories, and there's many articles written about stories and storytelling and how we evolved to tell stories, etc., etc. So everybody's aware of that. But why is humor so powerful? Okay, so here's why humor is so powerful. You see, in any setting, but particularly, say, business settings, everybody has kind of their guards up. Okay, it's almost like they're going, they're going into battle. They don't know where the shot is going to come from. Right. So everybody has their guards up. Now you need to recognize that, first of all. in any business communication negotiation, right? So humor is a great way for people to let their guard down, because people will only laugh, they will only chuckle when their guard is down. Okay? So by making them chuckle, by making them laugh, you are kind of inducing the reaction in their body and in their mind to let their guard down, so that now they can be more open to listening to what you have to say. Okay? And because this is such a favorite topic of mine, I'm going to share another story later. If anybody's a parent and you want to know how to communicate with your teenager, I recently learned some new techniques that I'm happy to share with you if there's interest in the Q&A. Okay, so that's about people love getting entertained. Another one, people pay more attention when they're surprised, right? We all evolved to pay more attention when we see something we don't expect, something surprising. So in the clip I shared, you noticed how everyone in the interview panel was a lot more attentive because Will Smith's character showed up for an interview without a proper shirt on, right? Now, while that is one form of surprise, it is an accidental or undesirable form. The point is not to show up, like that to an interview, but it's not the only form. Here's the thing. You can actually engineer surprise in a way that makes people pay more attention to what you have to say. And again, we'll review an example or two later and in the Q&A. Number 6, people really crave control, and they want to be empowered in conversations. Now, without giving them a sense of control, you're going to have a really hard time winning them over. And again, we'll talk about some predictable ways of giving people a sense of control in conversations. But the chief tool you have here is to ask them questions, usually questions with a foregone conclusion. Okay, number 7, everyone loves praise. As long as it's sincere, there are likely just a few people on earth who don't enjoy praise. All right. Number 8, people want to be liked and accepted as part of a group. In fact, the funny part of human nature is that we even want to be liked by the people whom we dislike. Okay. And the last one, number 9, people will go through great lengths to avoid what they think will be an unpleasant conversation. And they will secretly admire and think highly of someone who can conduct such conversations gracefully, right? The key with unpleasant conversations is that with the right messaging, they actually need not be unpleasant. Okay, they need not be unpleasant. Even if the underlying topic is a difficult one, that is the power of good messaging. Okay, so these are your 9 axioms. Now, as I said, once you understand these axioms, you can navigate conversations of arbitrary complexity by building up from them, right? Now, this requires practice, of course, but at some point, you will no longer need to think about the axioms. Just like you don't need to work up from these algebra axioms. If I asked you how to solve a quadratic equation, right? You practiced how to solve quadratic equations in school. And in many cases, you practiced a lot. So you can just do it, even now, decades afterwards. And in today's Q&A, we'll talk more about the application of some of these axioms. But if you have questions, feel free to post them in Slack, and our moderators will pick the best questions for later in today's sessions. But to finish up the presentation part of this session, I wanted to show you how you can apply some of these axioms for handling disagreements, because we are constantly handling disagreements. So what I'm going to show you is a formula. Right? Now, remember, a formula always has variables. So I'll keep the variables on, okay? But it'll give you a general structure of how you can work up from these axioms to the specific situation of handling any disagreement, really. So say it's a conversation where you and your colleague disagree on the priority of some issue, some feature or whatever, right? So here's a general formula you can use that's built up from the axioms I just shared with you now. Right? So first, when you are dealing with a conversation that involves a disagreement, you must remember axiom number 1 very well, that people don't actually listen very well. Okay? So if you have any hope of being able to convince the other party, you need to first get them to listen to you. Okay? So how do you do that? How do you first get them in the mode where they'll even be open to listening to you? All right? So for that, you have to recall axiom 2, which is people love it when you listen to them. So whenever you start any conversation about a disagreement, Start that conversation with a question that conveys your curiosity about their perspective. Okay, so don't start with your piece. See, most people make the mistake of starting with their piece in a disagreement. It's like, oh, let me tell you what I think about this, right? And don't do that, right? Be patient. Start the conversation with a question that conveys your curiosity about their perspective. Let them talk. Ask them follow-up questions with sincerity. And most importantly, actually listen to what they say. Don't just nod there, waiting for your turn to arrive. Because people can see through that. You actually have to listen to what they say. Okay? If you need to, listen to them for minutes, several minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it takes. All right? And only then start saying what you want to say. All right? And now, when you start saying what you say, I want you to remember axiom number 3, which is people love feeling right. All right? So when you say your thing, align your thing as closely as possible to what they said. You know what the 3 sweetest words in the English language are? Many people say, I love you, and perhaps, but I think a more generally applicable one, the 3 sweetest words in the English language are, you are right. You are right. So in places where they are right, call that out to them, okay? Now, another tip, use the unusual words or terms they used, for instance, to align your message as closely as possible to what they said. You see, initially, you want them to sense consistency. Okay? So don't start your piece with like, I disagree. Do not do that, because now they have their guard up. You want them to let their guard down. All right? So you want them to sense consistency first. If applicable, you want them to hear you are right about certain things. Okay? Now, as you speak, now you progressively build towards your case. And do this in a way that seems natural, how your point of view follows from theirs. Okay, now your point of view need not be congruent with theirs. It likely won't be because you have a disagreement, but at least it follows from their point of view. Now, once you've shared your point of view, remember axiom number 6, which is people crave control and empowerment, right? So once you end your piece, ask them an open-ended question, which is, I'll pause there. What do you think? Or what's your take on this? And wait, okay? Now, watch the other person's body language. If you feel like they are much more open, these are the questions you ask. If you still feel like they're being closed or they're uncomfortable, right? If you sense that they're not aligned, use axioms number 8 and 9, which is people want to be liked and accepted, and people avoid unpleasant conversations. So now's the time to actually potentially, have a little bit of an unpleasant kind of conversation, right? So take this to the next level, right? And ask a different question if you feel like they're not aligned after, doing all this, right? Which is, I want to ask you something. Can I ask you something? How far apart do you think we are on this issue? Or if you want to, take it one notch higher even, ask them, does it seem like we are too far apart here? What do you suggest we do here? Right? And then listen some more, because people naturally don't want to say yes to this, right? So most likely they'll say, oh, actually, we're not too far apart. Like, actually, I don't feel very strongly about this, right? But you kind of want them to say it. All right, so there's a lot more here, but hopefully you see this kind of formula for handling, a contentious conversation around disagreements. With that, like I said, this is a Q&A heavy session, so I'm done with the presentation section, and let's get to Q&A now. All right, Tina, I think you're up first. What questions do folks have? What questions have people asked?
Yes. Thank you, Shreyas. So there were a couple questions about aggression and this idea of, I'm often called aggressive and pushy, but I'm rewarded for my execution with good ratings from leadership. Will this help me grow?
Yeah, this is a very, very common question, especially among product people and leaders, right? Which is like you have to understand that, you know, your organization, your company wants you to get things done. And some companies, it's hard to get things done. So if you are the kind of person who kind of like still gets things done in the face of friction, in the face of, you know, differing opinions, in the face of analysis paralysis, then you are actually doing your organization a service, a good service. But the challenge a lot of us have, particularly PMs, we have, is that in doing so, in serving the organization's objectives, some of our colleagues might feel hurt, right? And they might feel like we've been disagreeable, right? They might feel like we've been aggressive with them, right? And this is really, look, I don't want us to just talk about theoretical kind of good stuff, right? Like this is the reality of product life in most places. Okay, so how do you kind of handle this, right? So first we have to start with and it can be handled. Okay, so it took me a while to learn this, and I was one of these PMs who got a lot of stuff done, but I was always angry, I was always upset, and in many cases I let other people see that I was angry and upset, right? And that doesn't go well, right? And it's like very common for young PMs, right? Like, so, you know, it's a common thing, but you have to learn how to get out of it, right? And you can get out of it. So in order to understand this, the first question really is, when does a person come across as aggressive, overtly aggressive? Like, think about that, right? Like, when does a person come across as overtly aggressive, right? And there are basically two high-level categories when this is the case, right? The first category is when, or the first kind of situation is when people don't feel heard, right? And they feel like this person is kind of steamrolling over them, right? Like people don't feel heard. And this person just says like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever, but we are doing it this way, right? We're doing it my way, right? And I'm the PM, so too bad, right? So that's one situation, right? When people don't feel heard. Remember the axioms, right? Remember the axioms, right? So that's one situation. And the second situation is when somebody is kind of exceeding the bounds of decent content, you know, decent conduct, ethical conduct, honesty, right? Like sometimes some PMs, unfortunately, kind of say two different things to two different people, right? They're inconsistent. And, you know, they will kind of bend the truth sometimes. It happens, right? And so, and sometimes they will like be, you know, they'll even cross the line of aggression, right? And I've had to, as a manager, I've had to deal with these kinds of situations with, you know, getting complaints for people on my team. And so, and again, this is bad and this should not happen, right? So for the second category, I'm just saying, don't do it. Absolutely don't do it, right? Because there's no other solution. And so really that's my prescription for that second category. Like you cannot be inconsistent, you should not be dishonest, right? And you should never cross a certain line. And you all know what the line is, right? There's a certain line in your organization and you don't cross that line. So just don't, you know, no project is worth that much. All right. Now, for the first one is where you can actually do sort of like where there is room for ambiguity, right? In the second one, there's no room for ambiguity, right? The first one, people don't feel heard, right? So what do you do? What do you do there? My main suggestion there is that I want you to be uncompromising about the impact. I want you to be uncompromising about, you know, the customer experience, right? While at the same time making clear that you are open to various ways of getting there. And as long as you can do that, and as long as you can create that space for exploring the various ways of getting there, right? People will feel heard, right? So I want you to be very clear. See, I'm not saying, well, just give up on the goals, right? Because then you won't be doing the right thing for your organization, for your company. right? And for your customers potentially. So I don't want you to give up on those goals of getting shit done, but I want you to reframe, right? I want you to be uncompromising about the impact, and I want you to convey that with the confidence and being assertive about it, right? But then as soon as you're assertive about it, now change mode, right? Change mode to being more open and say, look, I really do think we need to achieve this impact. And here's why. But what I'd like to focus our conversation on is how we can do it. And look, I need more input from everybody on this. And I need input on where, the blind spots are in the document that's written, right? So I'd love to invite a discussion on that, right? So, and do this consistently, right? So that's my prescription of how to handle this. Again, I want to give you a formula that you can use in many different situations. And so this is the formula. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, next question, Satyajit.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to grab. So a couple of people have asked around a similar topic, and they have smartly stayed anonymous on this, which is these are all people that have trouble with their managers, which is sometimes can be something as, the manager is not inspiring, is very focused on output. Sometimes it feels like it can be a competence issue, right? Like the person changes priorities, is bad at comms, can also be sort of all over the place. So how do you think about your manager in this context? Like, how do you sort of think about communication? How do you think about managing someone like this?
Oh, yes. This, again, very common situation. So a lot of the conventional wisdom around this, I feel, is incorrect, and it actually harms people. Okay, so the biggest piece of conventional wisdom, I bet if you put it in ChatGPT even, or somewhere else on Twitter or anywhere else, a common response will be, well, give your manager some feedback because maybe they don't know what they're doing. I'll tell you that's really bad blanket advice. Okay, so my perspective is different from actual experience, right? Look, most people are not as open to feedback as even they themselves might claim. All right, that's number one. It gets worse when there is a clear power dynamic. Okay, so peer feedback works better, right, than unsolicited feedback to your manager. Most cases, with most managers, it will not work. And sure, in an ideal world, I want it to work, right? But we don't live in an ideal world. You still need to operate and succeed in a less than ideal world, right? So unless the manager has shown very clear signal that he or she is very, very open-minded and has a growth mindset, and you should be able to have seen that, right, through your interactions with them. Unless a manager has shown that, don't do the whole oh, can I give you some feedback? Don't do it. Don't do it. All right. Or I have some feedback for you. No, it is not going to work. It's not going to serve your goals. You'll feel good about doing it, but it's not going to serve your goals. Okay. So in these situations, the reality is, in these types of situations, you want your manager to leave you alone as much as possible. If the manager is incompetent, etc. So it's basically they're not going to help you anyway, right, to achieve your goals. If anything, they might get in the way, right? So you want your manager to leave you alone as much as possible, right? So how do you do that? Right? So what you want to do is you want to suggest to the manager that it would be helpful if there were more structure around how the two of you interacted. Okay? That's kind of what you want to suggest to your manager. And you might suggest it in many different ways depending on the situation. But one way is you might ask in a one-on-one, hey, Bob or Alice, whatever your manager's name is, we've been doing these one-on-ones. I'm just curious. They've been very helpful for me. I'm just curious, how helpful are they for you? I know you're busy. And I know your calendar, I see your calendar is fairly full. I want to make sure that our time together is extremely high leverage for you, right? So I'm just curious, is this a great use of your time? And embedded in that question is, how can I make this a better use of your time, right? Ask that open-ended question and just let it go, right? Just let them talk, right? through this question, arrive at a revised approach of how you should engage. It might mean, oh, you know what, we're going to do one-on-ones every other week, right? And we'll do async updates, right? Or they might say that, oh, actually, you should talk more closely with this peer of mine because that's the person whose project you're working on. Or you should talk closely with my boss because you're directly working on some project there. Whatever the case might be, right? Like, don't give them a solution. Don't say, oh, and I thought about this. Because remember the axiom, people want empowerment, right? And they want control. So don't take away that control by suggesting an option. The moment you suggest the option, they're not going to like the option. But if there's an option they came up with, they'll love it. And then when they come up with it, say, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. This makes a lot of sense. I wonder why I did not think about this. And be sincere when you do this, right? Like all of this only works when you do it with integrity and sincerity, right? So, and document this approach in your one-on-one doc or somewhere, right? Like document it and follow through with it. There's a lot more to discuss here, but like unfortunately, a lot of it depends on the specifics of the situation. But what I just shared with you should apply in every situation. So hope that's helpful.
No, that's great. Stina, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, let's take one more and then we'll do a quick break.
Yes. So you touched on this a little bit also in the course, but how can I get my manager to support my career goals? Shifting the focus from projects maybe that are, accretive to my career.
Yes, yeah. And so it's a great question. And it turns out we cover a lot of this question in the course. On the second day, we spend 1 hour on this question of how do you manage up? How do you kind of work with your manager to align on your goals? The main thing I'll share here, I'm not going to spend an hour on this obviously right now. The main thing I'll share here is you want to use the working backwards tool, right? So what you want to do, and this is something we expand on in the course, is like what you want to do is you want to have a career conversation with your manager at some point. And at the end of that career conversation, what I want you to say to your manager is like, this was super helpful. Thank you for taking the time. This gives me a lot of clarity. And for further clarity, see, I want to give you exact words, right? Like, because remember, all problems are messaging problems. And even awkward conversations become very easy if you have the right words for it, right? So you say like, I feel like what would give me, even further clarity is if we created a working backwards view of what it would look like for me to be at this next level. Right. And so perhaps I can, take the action item to create that working backwards view of like, where do I need to be 9 months from now, impact wise, outputs wise, and visibility wise, et cetera, right? So, and again, in the course, we have a template, sort of the promo drivers template that we kind of like go through for this. But what you want to then do is you want to create some artifact, right? But first you want to get your manager's permission, which is like, is it okay if in our next one-on-one, we shared a draft working backwards view of what it might look like so we could work together on it? And of course, when you frame the question this way, there's the only answer they can give, ask questions where the answer is a foregone conclusion, right? So the only answer they can give is yes, right? So that's a brief version of it. All right, awesome. So I think this is the time that was set for a quick break and some announcements. So let's do that. And speaking of the course, this is actually very topical. So Shrey, I think you're up next.
I am. Thank you, Shreyas. Just a quick announcement on the course to what Shreyas was saying. The next cohort of the course, for those of you that weren't there for the first couple of minutes, is in exactly 2 weeks. This course is live and it is very interactive. So this is a Zoom webinar, and the main difference is on the Zoom webinar to what we will host on the actual course is that you can actually see your fellow students. You can get into breakout groups with them, interact with them. You're able to unmute and ask questions to Shreyas directly and also to your fellow students. And there will actually be several Q&A sessions with Shreyas directly. A lot of students say the kind of live, candid, unfiltered Q&A sessions with Shreyas are the best bits, as do people in Product Club. And with over 10 hours of content, which condenses a couple of decades of Shreyas' experience and the experience of some of the most prominent PM leaders and executive recruiters in the world. I actually got a few DMs on Slack about questions on the course. I can't answer them individually now because I'm presenting and really focused on the operations of this. But we actually have answers to most of these questions on the course homepage. So I'll show it real quick. If you can all see my screen. So this is Shreyas's course on career management for product managers. Shreyas created this course because he found out there is a huge gap right now in terms of like understanding of how you should navigate your career so you can create a great career that works for you. Shreyas created this course based on hundreds of coaching conversations that he has had with product people, very capable people that he found that did not have the right frameworks to be able to have like the right way of thinking about managing your own career. And if you really think about it, I used to be a product manager. Like as a product manager, your most important product really is you. So just like we like to be rigorous about our product decisions, I think we also need to be even more rigorous with how we think about our most important product, ourselves and our own career. So that's why Shreyas has been very passionate about teaching this course. And we're very fortunate to actually have 3 alumni of Shreyas's course here with us today, Melissa, Paolo, and Rohan. So I'll actually pass it off to Melissa. Melissa, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Shrey. I think our videos might be disabled by the host, but yeah, happy to just jump in with the intro. Great, there we go. Awesome, cool. Hi, Melissa McCoy. I'm a senior PM at Google in San Francisco. And for Google and at Google, I focus mostly on building products in emerging markets, a lot in Africa, Latin America, APAC, on Android Maps, now on Google Pay. I kind of own our Google Pay checkout button online. And I would say when I was thinking about this course, like my main hesitation was I was looking for my next role to be in kind of less common companies, looking a lot at emerging markets, quite early stage, and kind of wondering if this kind of course is more oriented towards someone looking for the normal kind of to move to a normal suspect, I guess, in the Bay Area. But another PM on my NBU team recommended it, so I made the jump. And I would say like all the content I think can be applicable for, I think, a more traditional journey, but I think actually was super valuable to someone like me that was looking for something that was earlier stage, that was like there was a less clear path of how to find the role. I think a lot of tactics around outbound and the importance of it with working with exec recruiters and VC, past people who think you're awesome. And that really actually, I was able to put that into practice quickly after the course to kind of find interesting roles, learn how to select companies, and realizing going to a nonprofit or something that was kind of less tech first would come with certain sacrifices. So all of that was very valuable, as well as kind of just perspective building. I think seeing all the other PMs in the course and their different journeys kind of helped me realize all the different kind of paths one can take and what you would be gaining or sacrificing by following one. So yeah, I would say generally I found it to be valuable, and we're happy to answer any other questions offline or otherwise. So I will go ahead and pass it to Paolo, who's another, an alumni on the call.
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, my name is Paolo Belcastro. I work at Automatic, where I'm the head of product for a product line called Jetpack. I worked before also on products in WordPress.com. Automatic is a company behind a number of products around WordPress. And interestingly, I joined the course. I had been following Shreyas for a while on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I joined the course knowing that I had no project of changing company, and I still don't, but it would be useful for my evolution within the company. And coincidentally, the course was on a weekend, and I was at the same time preparing a presentation for the following Tuesday, where I was presenting in front of an internal advisory board, which is constituted of executives in the company. And I found the parts about communication with executives really important, really helpful in the course. It helped me revisit not the content of my presentation, but really the way I presented it, particularly something that Shreyas mentioned even a little earlier today, which is that I was focusing on them instead of focusing on myself. I was focusing on their perception of the product, their questions, instead of my story, the story I wanted to tell. And that presentation ended up being extremely successful, and I got great feedback. And more importantly, I actually got what I wanted to obtain out of it, which was a plan for 2024 and budgets for 2024. And after that, that was very, very short-term, immediate benefit. After that, I realized that all the advice that helps preparing your next step in your career was actually extremely useful inside the company, particularly around areas like running your own performance cycles, something that has allowed me to be seizing opportunities in the sense that, you know, there's a performance cycle in every company, but sometimes opportunities don't arise at the right time. And if you're out of phase with that cycle, you can skip 1, 2, 3 years. And in this context, it has helped me be ready to seize opportunities as they appeared, because I was not waiting for others to assess my performance. And so I found this extremely useful without a project of changing companies. And yeah, with that, I will turn it over to Rohan.
Thanks, Paulo. Should I think there we go. Awesome. Thank you. So, hi, folks. My name is Rohan. I am a product manager at Stripe. And I was a part of this course about a year ago now. And very similar to Paulo, I did not join the course because I was looking to make a career change in senses of changing jobs or changing companies. It was still like within my current company is what I was kind of looking to grow and just do certain things better and do certain things differently. And I've said this many times before, I'm going to repeat it again. I feel that this course was sort of the single best investment I've made in my own growth in a very, very long time. And I honestly feel like if schools and colleges had this kind of ROI, just the world and the industry would be a very different place. And if I had to sort of describe that weekend in maybe 3 words, I have to say it's like it was extremely intense, actionable, and very, very thought-provoking. And there's 3 very specific things I wanted to share that I learned in the course that have very meaningfully changed my life at work over the last about a year at this point. The first one is like writing down what my 3-year goals are and assessing them against sort of core skills and competencies that I need to grow. They really help me identify like what are my superpowers, what are things that I'm sort of good at, which are my strengths, and then what are my growth areas. And having this sort of structured in a way that can be actionable gave me a chance to kind of discuss with my manager and my leadership and Skip and everyone. And we were able to sort of create opportunities over the last 1 year where I could really leverage my superpowers to make significant impact at work and then also make progress on what my growth areas are. So I feel that was a very tangible outcome. It also helped me to kind of stop thinking of my career in terms of a single-threaded ladder and just adjusting my perspective on what I really want to build with my professional life. It kind of helped me assess the different paths to grow that I hadn't necessarily considered previously. And the last point I want to share is not just at the course, but after the course is over, everyone who's in these courses ends up as a part of Shreyas's product club. And this itself is a community of alumni, and it's such an incredible continuous resource. I think we've done so many group activities over the last years that have helped sort of build and hone so many skills that I've had some very engaging and insightful conversations and discussions, regular sync and async sessions with Shreyas. And just like the course, I feel the product club also keeps it extremely real, and you kind of have access to a bunch of people with that kind of mindset who are willing to collectively help each other grow. So I feel like those are very, very tangible benefits over the last 12 months that I've gotten from this course. And again, I very, very strongly recommend it, to a point where one of my very close friends and coworkers, I asked her to sign up for the course with the guarantee that if she did not like it or did not get value from it, I would pay her money back for the course. So that's literally that strongly as I would endorse it. So yeah, I think that's it for me, and maybe back to Shrey.
Thanks a lot, Rohan. Appreciate you for jumping on. Just wanted to share real quick that before we go back to Shreyas, Shreyas is actually offering everyone who's attending this seminar $100 off for the January cohort of his course, which starts exactly 2 weeks from now. The code is on screen and it is Shreyas100. It'll only work for the first 50 people who sign up using the code. So if you are interested in joining the course, just head over to maven.com and enroll. I can actually just show you real quick. To use this course, you can simply enter it on the checkout page like this, and you can apply your promo code here, where you just type the code Shreyas100 and click apply. We're also going to share this code in Slack, and it'll go out via email, so you have it handy. And just real quick, for those of you that have already enrolled for the January cohort at the full price, don't worry, you can just fill out the form at bit.ly enrolled student discount, which is right at the bottom here, and you'll get a $100 refund on the course. And real quick, before I turn it over to Shreyas, we get a lot of questions on the course, so I just want to quickly highlight a few things. There are multiple videos on this course from alum like Paolo, like Rohan, like Melissa, answering different questions, whether it's, does this suit my seniority? Does it suit, someone who's based in Europe or in Asia? There's different videos that you can click. They're a couple of minutes long that typically, do answer your questions. So yeah, with that, that's very much it for me. And back to you, Shreyas.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And we are now going to go into the second portion of Q&A. Remember, this is a Q&A heavy session. So I'm curious. I see a ton of questions on Slack. And like I said, unfortunately, we won't be able to answer all, but I'm excited to answer more questions. And maybe just time-wise, I know this was scheduled up until, 15 minutes past the hour. We'll definitely go to 15 minutes past the hour. Maybe we might go 5-10 minutes over, not more. If you do have to jump off later on, feel free to, you will get access to the recording. Everybody who registered will get access to the recording. But excited to hear additional questions.
All right, so I think Stina and I are going to go back and forth and pull from the Slack. Shreya, so here's the first one for you, which is Arun has a question, which is how do you deal with people that, constantly respond negatively or pessimistically to your views, to your opinions, and they bring up past failures in an org or something of that sort? Like, how do you handle that communication challenge?
Yeah, so there are, what I like to do in these situations is first identify the root cause. Okay, so, and this is a general approach, but particularly for this situation, it is very important to identify the root cause, right? Because from our perspective, such a person might come across as difficult. Right? This person is really difficult. But one fundamental insight of human nature is nobody wakes up in the morning saying, oh, I am going to be difficult today, right? And yet we find that, from our perception, some people are difficult. But again, recognize these people are not waking up in the morning saying, okay, yes, I'm going to be difficult. Now, there's probably a very, very tiny percentage of the population that does. But, most people you're interacting with, they're not waking up in the morning thinking they're going to be difficult. So why does this happen? What is the root cause? So there are a few possibilities here that we need to understand, right? And we need to recognize each of those possibilities. One, and this is the elephant in the room, is that they just don't like you, right? Or you don't like each other, but you kind of have to work with each other, right? So that's one possibility. Second possibility is that, and this is the one that people fixate on, right? But it's not the only possibility, but I want to call it out. It can sometimes happen that incentives are misaligned, right? Like that they are trying to optimize for something, or they've been asked to optimize for something, and you've been asked to optimize for something else, and therein lies the problem. You see, this is the problem with most kind of very operationally oriented product leaders is they think this is the only possibility. So anytime something like this happens, they keep going back up, right, to executives saying oh, we need incentives to be aligned, and you have a meeting, right, and still this kind of disagreeableness and disagreement continues. Right, forever, basically. So I want to highlight it as a possibility, but I want to caution you that it is not the only possibility. Okay. But okay, so that's the second possibility, right? Third possibility is that they're working off of different information, right? They are working off of different information. Now, this information can be information in the external world, but it can also be like their own processing. The way they think is fairly different than the way you think. Okay, and this happens again. One problem with our workplaces, modern workplaces, is that we don't recognize the importance of personality, right? But people have different personalities, and you kind of have to recognize it. And that's actually a wonderful thing, that people have different personalities, because that enables the, to quote a cliche, there's some to be greater, than the whatever the parts, right? So it's important to understand that too, right? Like so these are roughly kind of three possibilities, right? And then, sometimes a fourth one is that this person actually has the right intent, and they kind of even like you, and their incentives are also aligned with yours. And they generally have a, like a roughly aligned perspective, but their communication style is very abrasive, right? And so, like the content is aligned, but the communication is not. And so then it can come across as being very difficult, right? Like, and these folks usually are cynical with everybody, right? You're not the only one facing this. For the first three, maybe it's possible you're one of the few ones or only ones that you're facing it. But for this fourth one, they're going to be like that with everybody. Okay. So, okay, now fine. Like, so first you need to understand like the root cause, because like only if you understand the root cause can you kind of like try to address it, right? The key thing I'll share, and again, this is a very deep question, so I'm not going to go into like a lot of detail, but the key thing I'll share around what you want to do in this kind of situation is, and I'm going to share a very useful technique for you. Okay. Very, very useful technique is, and I learned this from very late in my career from one of my last managers at Stripe, is just call out the elephant in the room. Just call it out, because nobody does. And this works back to, this is actually a principle or an approach or a formula that's built from the axioms. Remember, people pay more attention to surprise, right? And people want to be right, and they want to be liked, right? Like those are the axioms. From these axioms, you can derive this kind of formula of call out dispassionately, without any anger or like showing overly any emotion, call out the elephant in the room. And so what does this mean concretely? What this means concretely is that at the right time, perhaps with this individual, you might say something like the following. Let's say this person's name is Bob, right? So what you say is, Bob, can I ask you a question? Right? And why am I starting with that? Because remember the axiom around people want to feel like they're in control and they want to feel empowered, right? So you kind of want them to say yes, because now they've let their guard down. They feel like they are in control, right? Or they have some degree of control, right? So, Bob, can I ask you a question? It's like Bob says yes. Of course, Bob says yes. So, and then you follow it up with, I have noticed that there is just a lot of friction in our interactions. And I have been feeling it for a long time. And I could only kind of really gather up the courage to share that with you right now. And it is something I've not felt with, most colleagues. But, sometimes I even find myself, trying to avoid having a conversation because I don't want to feel this friction and this kind of animosity. And I just wanted to ask you, like, because I started thinking this morning, like that perhaps if I'm feeling this way, perhaps you are also feeling that way. So I just wanted to check in on your perspective. So yeah, I'm just curious what you think. So again, you kind of like, and you haven't made an accusation, right? Like what you've said is, I feel this way. And I'm just curious if you also feel this way. So you're almost showing care for them, right? And then let them speak, right? And look, in most cases, what will happen when you do this is, first of all, they'll be shocked that you brought this up, because nobody brings up the elephant. So again, remember the last axiom, right? Like people avoid uncomfortable conversations, and they admire people who can have uncomfortable conversations gracefully. And because you did it gracefully, right? Like, the tone I used, everything, the words I used, they were graceful. They were not aggressive, right? And so because you did it gracefully, they are a little bit like scared, and so what they are going to respond likely with is like, oh, no, actually it's not that bad. Or maybe they'll say, I appreciate you bringing this up because I also feel this way, right? And then when that happens, now that's the point for you to take that conversation further, right? Because now you made a breakthrough, right? You're no longer talking about content. Let's figure out this relationship thing first, right? So again, the specifics will vary, and please use your judgment. But this is the way you kind of make inroads in these types of situations. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great advice. Do you want to take the next one? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so there's a couple that have come up around when you're navigating tricky communication around addressing trust, particularly either avoidance in communication with senior stakeholders. So some have encountered situations where trust deficits have, in the relationship with those stakeholders, posed those challenges. So how do you effectively navigate those scenarios, especially when maybe there's communication avoidance coming from those senior stakeholders, potentially stemming from past experiences that might have impacted your reputation?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. There is no easy solution to this. The hard and the tried and tested solution is that you demonstrate how things are going to be different now, right? You demonstrate thoughtfulness, you demonstrate good judgment, you demonstrate good communication, you demonstrate good execution, you demonstrate the desired impact, right? And that's the way to kind of really build trust or rebuild trust, right? With senior execs, senior stakeholders, right? And that will take time. That's why I'm saying there's no easy way to do it, right? That will take time. Now, all that said, there is a related question, because again, I want to make this really practical, right? Which is like, in some cases, you kind of at least want a chance. You want to be given a chance to be able to do that, right? And so you want to focus the actions that you would take in this situation towards getting that chance, right? And this is where you want to likely leverage your manager or somebody senior, somebody with a lot of credibility. And it doesn't have to be your manager, right? But usually it's the manager, but it doesn't have to be. It might be an engineering partner. It might be a design partner. It might be somebody else. Find the people who have a lot more credibility in the org and who perhaps have a lot more credibility with these stakeholders or these senior folks, right? Find those people and have an honest discussion with them, right? And again, most people try to avoid that discussion because most people try to avoid this kind of unpleasant discussion. But you can do it, right? Like you can go to your engineering counterpart if he or she is very well regarded in the org. And if, by the way, this only works if they regard you well, right? If they think you're not doing well, then it's pointless. So they need to be an advocate of yours. But get them and get their advice. So you're not asking them to do something, but get their advice on how you can kind of rebuild your reputation, right? Or build that trust with senior stakeholders. And you know what? People love giving advice. People love giving advice. So like I'll give you another tip, which is like, this is a beautiful question to ask. And guess what? Like this specific question, these exact words don't get uttered very much in the workplace. But when you utter them, they work like magic, right? Which is, hey, Alice, can I get your advice on something? That's it. Okay. Can I get your advice on something? You see, like this should be common in the workplace, but because in the workplace, we, especially product people, we need to have our guards up and we need to look like we have it all together and we are very powerful. We never, almost never, people will go through their entire career not having uttered these words, right? Which is, can I get your advice on something? Right? And of course they'll say yes. And now you say, hey, this is the situation. So I've noticed that you are able to manage these kind of stakeholder conversations and product reviews really well. What advice do you have for me on what I should know and what I should do? Right. So you kind of want to kind of use this, don't use the one conversation to as an end all be all, which is at the end of this conversation, I need Alice to commit that she is going to, lobby for me with the CEO, right? Then it's not going to work because then Alice is going to feel like you're kind of trying to use her credibility for your benefit, right? So instead, you can exercise more control by giving up control. right? So this is a very paradoxical thing. It's actually also a big lesson in Eastern philosophy. If you read the Tao Te Ching and other kind of Hindu philosophy and whatnot, right? Like the best way to exercise control is to give up control, right? So try to give up control of the conversation, because you'll find that like these advocates will perhaps suggest some paths. But now that they've suggested a path, they're now more bought into your success, right? And now use that in the current conversation or the next conversation you have, right? So you kind of want to make progress that way. So explore those avenues as well in the short term, while you work in the long term to actually, show the impact that will rebuild trust.
Awesome. I'm going to try and there's Rahul asked a question that I think is interesting, which is, you mentioned using humor, storytelling, and sort of surprising people as a way to like, sort of excel as in your axioms. How do you get better at that? Like, if you feel like this is not something that you do well currently, is it a mindset change? Is it resources? Like, how does one get better at that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert. Like, this is not an comedy or improv class by any means, but I will share some tips with you. One is, humor is an interesting thing, especially in the workplace. The more niche it is, right, the better, right? Like if it's something very niche about how your team does work, or something about your company, or some acronym in your company, right? Like, again, like I can't give you the actual joke, but these jokes are everywhere around us, right? These are very niche jokes, right? So and like, do it without don't do it at any specific person's expense, right? Or even at a team's expense. So like, just again, don't cross that line. There's just humor everywhere, right? Like, so just like try to be more observant. And that's what, successful comedians do, or people who make others laugh. They're just very good observers of human nature and of systems, right? So that's like one general approach I will share, is just like be more open, more observant, and the humor will come to you, right? So that's one. Now, if this is not concrete enough, right? Like it will be for some people, but some people, no, but give me something more. Give me something I can use on Monday, right? Because you can't really change your kind of like funny level by Monday, but you can kind of, right? And so I'm going to give you another tip, which is, if you find that you struggle with this, right, just use external resources, right? So like bring in cartoons, right? Like Dilbert or whatever, right? Like bring in funny videos, right? Like, and this is why memes are so powerful, by the way. Memes are so popular, not memes, but GIFs and whatnot, right? Like that get shared in Slack. The reason they are popular is because in many cases, they make us look more funny, more entertaining, more exciting than we actually are, right? Because the GIF is representing us in some ways. It's next to our name. So that's the psychology behind sharing GIFs, right? So just share GIFs, right? Like share funny memes, right? Share funny videos, right? But like the key thing here is you need to share them in context. But still, it's fairly easy, right? Like if you're going into a product review meeting, right? Like you can find some content, product review with your team, right? Like you can find some, and you want to lighten it up a bit, right? You can find some content online about like a funny product review or whatever. So use external sources if you yourself are struggling with like, coming up with original funny content. Okay, let's perhaps take 2 more questions and then we'll end it.
Perfect. There's one that came up from Priya. So let's say you've got all these axioms in place and you're ready to go and you're feeling really confident, but your emotions, as rational as you are, get the best of you in these moments. We often have very limited response opportunities. So in challenging situations, when you're looking to find the right words, and oftentimes we hide our feelings or avoid the conversations, like, do you have any strategies or insights on sort of managing your emotions to craft those impactful responses so that you're not the one that ends up avoiding the conversation? Yeah, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I love that question, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So the first thing I will say is that the way leadership works and the way product works is that once you have developed some of the core skills and mastered some of them, a large part of your success and impact from that point forward is going to be reliant on how well you manage your own psychology. So it's not outside, it's inside. It's not work outside, it's inside work. Okay? Okay, so then how does one do that? It is not easy. The reason it's not easy is because we have all sorts of programming, right? We have some genetic programming, meaning like it was just decided that we're going to think this way or we're going to feel this way the moment we were conceived. Okay. And like that is the toughest, right? But then over time, as we grow up and go through life, there is more like programming, more enhancements, more modules added here, right? Like in some ways, we are kind of like building and training an LLM inside us, right? And so it's going to do a certain thing based on that kind of training and programming, right? And so, there is work required to the first step is understanding it. Actually, the first step is even wanting to do it, right? That's 80% of people fail at that. It's like, no, I'm perfect. Like, and they don't say it, but that's how they feel. I'm perfect. It's the world that needs to change, right? Like it's like all these stupid, stupid folks in legal or these people in design and like these engineers and, these executives. And like, it's always all the time, the problem is outside, right? And it's like, hey, if you go through your life, if you've gone through 3, 4, 5 decades of your life thinking the problem is always outside, and if you're a smart and logical person, I want you to calculate the probability that the problem is always outside every single time, right? Because you're going to suffer some cognitive dissonance there, right? As you do that, because you're a smart person, you think math is great, calculate the probability, right? That you are always right and everybody else is always wrong, right? Or you never have to change and everybody else has to change, right? Like just think about it logically, right? So that's the first step. Most people don't take that step, right? Just like, yeah, I kind of need to do works inside, right? Now, some people do too much work inside, so that you should avoid that too, right? Like, so just calling it out. Okay, once you've gotten over that hump, right? Like, so what's next, right? The second thing is you need to kind of recognize that this is not going to be work that will reap benefit on Monday. You see many people, so of this kind of, we left those 80%, now the 20% that do recognize some work needs to be done. Out of those 20%, easily an 80%, 90% of those will only do work that will benefit them on Monday, right? Meaning I have this problem, I need to solve this problem, so I will do something, some learning, but then like I'll only do it localized to this problem, right? But the problem is like with ourselves, when you're working on yourself and your own psychology, right? Your own emotional regulation, right? It's never going to present itself as something you need to solve by Monday, right? So you need to understand that the long-term nature of this, the ambiguous nature of this, right? So that's like the next step. So now hopefully you get over that hump as well. After that, and only after that, we can start talking about resources, right? And the resources are out there, right? Like there are so many resources out there. And basically what I would recommend is just read philosophy, read some kind of religious texts, but religion in the sense of, this texts that focus on calmness, tranquility, happiness, being more mindful, being more present, all of that stuff, right? Like you can read the miracles and other things, but like, that's not what I mean. Like, so there's a lot of kind of wisdom in a lot of these kind of quote religious texts. So you can pursue that, right? Like, and there's books like The Power of Now, right? Like, and other things that are kind of, not as, they're a little more kind of secular. So, whatever your preferences are, you'll find books, right? Like, and again, you're smart enough to figure this out. But the books by themselves are not enough, right? Like, and by the way, there's amazing YouTube videos now. So you don't even need to go to books. Like just be on YouTube if that's your learning style. So now the next step is kind of practicing these things, right? Practicing being able to watch your thoughts, disassociating your identity from your thoughts, right? Being able to pause between like, stimulus and response, right? Those are the core things, core building blocks of kind of addressing and being kind of more emotionally regulated and managing your emotions better so that you may respond better to these types of situations. All right, let's take one last question and then we'll end it.
All right, last question. Let's make this a fun one. Somewhere in the middle, you talked about discovering some superpowers around teenage communication. Shreyas, so like a couple of people have asked, like, what is this? What are these new tactics you've learned on better communicating with teenagers?
Oh yeah, I love it. So basically, my son is 15 years old, and just over the last 1 year or so, I found that like it's kind of like hard. It's harder to kind of communicate with him because sometimes he's just resistant, right? Like he's just like, whatever, dad. Like I don't want to listen to you. And this I pick him up, drop him off to school. So we spend and I take him to a few places that he needs to go to. So like I'm usually in the car with him. So okay, one of the things I learned, by the way, is like when you pick up your child from school, especially once they are like 10, 11, 12 and older, and especially if they're in high school, is like don't ask them that like, so how was your day, or so tell me about your day, unless you have found previous evidence that they're very willing to share or excited to share, right? Because high school particularly is a very socially demanding experience. And kids, even high school kids, kind of need some break. So when they are in the car with you, you pick them up, that's actually a break. So you don't want to bring them back to the like, oh, so tell me how's your day, or like, oh, I'm paying for your school, so you better tell me, give me an account or a status update on how you're like, don't do that, right? Like, so that's one tip. But anyway, getting back to the core thing that I learned that has worked very well is, I kind of like just wanted to have more conversation with my son as we were driving to school in the morning, particularly. Right. And I found that like, he was very resistant to it in that kind of 11 minute drive, especially as he, just over the last year or so. So I somehow decided, oh, wait, like, I think I can use humor. Okay. So, and he's a funny kid and he loves to laugh, and he loves to make other people laugh. And so I just picked up these kind of dad joke books, right? Intentionally dad joke books. And like, I go to some websites as well to kind of get dad jokes and puns in particular, right? Like they're just like very bad puns, right? But, now what I do is like every day when we are driving, like I will start off with like a pun, right? And it's a new pun. And sometimes it makes him laugh like crazy. Other times it's just like, that was terrible, right? But in either case, after that, right, like I feel like, we can have a conversation, and he's much more open to like, talking to me. And to the extent that now sometimes, like if I forget, by the way, sometimes when I like these days, like if I forget, I'm like, while I'm waiting for him to join me in the car, I'm like furiously Googling, like, but sometimes I'll forget, and then he'll remind me like, hey dad, don't you have a joke for me today? Right. So that's just a like, a simple little parenting tactic that I'm actually very proud of.
That was great.
Wonderful. Great. So I think we'll call this done now. Thanks everyone for staying, through the whole thing. And the recording will be shared with you all soon. And again, this was a wonderful, wonderful session. I really enjoyed it. I love the questions. Sorry, we couldn't get to all questions, but that was kind of by design. I just wanted to kind of thank the entire team for putting all of this together. So, Shreyas, Tina, Satyajit, Melissa, Rohan, Paolo, and, various other folks who kind of helped make this happen. This is a lot of work, and there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make this go seamlessly. So thanks everyone for making this happen. And once again, thank you for the time. And Shrey, I'll just hand it back to you to close things off.
Thanks a lot, Shreyas, and thank you, everybody. See you all.
Bye-bye.
Big fella. 2 sips and now you want to trip, big fella. You not a drinker. I can see it all in your leg, big fella. You wobbly, big fella. You finna fall. Sit down, you drunk, big fella. All night I've been drinking, 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 Everybody outside when I pull up outside all night though. Everybody high five, everybody wanna smile, everybody wanna lie, that's nice, no. Oh, now you wanna chill, oh, now you wanna build, oh, now you got the bill, that's cool though. Oh, now you got the gas, oh, now you wanna laugh, oh, now you need a cab, that's true though. All you do is talk, I ain't got shit to say. Can't no one get in my car, I don't even valet. Long discussions, oh, you my cousin? No, you wasn't. You just want to ride. You just want to talk about politics, Chicago shit, and rocket shit. Shut up. Start dancing, ho. You just wanna spill fries on the seat, Sprite on the seat, come ride on the seat. Last girl, she a lie on the seat, she a fart on the seat, now she jogging the streets. I don't trust no one, faking like a fan, asking for a pic. You should use your phone, call a Uber, you a goofy if you think I don't know you need a lift. Is you is or is you ain't got gas money? No IOUs or debit cards, I need cash money. So back up, I need space now. I need you to slow it down, it's not a race now. I can't really hear what you gotta say now. Shut up. Start dancing, ho.